Hi there, Davey Cretin here for Cretin Classics, and unfortunately I feel that I should do this video to honor the memory of John Sykes, who was a phenomenal guitar player, an underrated singer, and a very good songwriter. Now, John Sykes is known mostly for playing with Whitesnake and Blue Murder and Thin Lizzy, but he's done a ton of other things in his career. So he was born John James Sykes, July 29th, 1959, in Reading, Berkshire, England. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Berkshire. Could be Berkshire, it's probably Berkshire. He was married for over about a decade, and he was with his now ex-wife, Jennifer Brooks, they were married for 10 years. They were together for about 15 years. They had 3 sons together. So he does have 3 heirs. Maybe one of them plays guitar and will pick up his mantle. But I just want to give a brief history about Mr. Sykes, who passed away. We're not even sure when he passed away. Very sadly, he died at 65 from cancer, which is very young, considering the last surviving member of the band, Call the Band, just died at 87. And here's John Sykes dying 22 years younger, which is a shame because his career was from 1980 until 2022 when he last released some music, so for over 40 years. And there's not a huge output because he was a perfectionist. You could say, just like Tom Scholz in Boston, he took his time to put out stuff because it just had to be perfect and the way he wanted it. And it did cause a lot of problems throughout his career, unfortunately. So like I said, he started in 1980. He started playing guitar at age 14 before that. And he had a friend named Mervyn Goldsworthy. And I know that name from reading Kerrang for years. And I know that he was in a band called FM, but he was also in Diamond Head and Samson. And Mervyn talked John into playing guitar in a band called Street Fighter. So in 1980, John Sykes played on a song called She's No Angel by Street Fighter, which appeared on a new wave of British heavy metal compilation called New Electric Warriors in 1980. Now, from reading Kerrang all those years way back in the 80s and 90s, I know that they pronounced it Nawabum, which is very cumbersome, but that's the abbreviation for New Wave of British Heavy Metal. So he played in Street Fighter, and Sykes left Street Fighter to join the Tigers of Pantang. Unfortunately, I personally do not know the Tigers of Pantang albums, and that's something I will have to correct in the near future, because I know a lot of his other work after that. So he played with the Tigers of Pantang, and they released 2 albums in 1981. Spellbound first in the early part of the year, and Crazy Nights in the latter part of 1981. He played on 2 songs only from their 1982 album, the 4th Tigers of Pantang album, called The Cage. He plays on tracks 8 and 10, if memory serves. He then left the Tigers of Pantang and hooked up with John Sloman. John Sloman had played in Lone Star, a band called Lone Star in the late 70s, AOR-type band, and then with Uriah Heep from about 79 to 81 or so. So he hooked up in John Sloman's Badlands, which was oddly enough the name of John Sloman's band. And I will come back to the name Badlands later in this video. So he played with them briefly. They had a deal, but the band folded. That was in about 1982, which leads up to late 1982, September of 82, where John Sykes is named the new guitar player in Thin Lizzy. And in 1983, the last studio record by Thin Lizzy is released called Thunder and Lightning. And that is a great album. That's the first album that I know in John Sykes' discography, really. Great Thin Lizzy album. It's probably the heaviest album, known as their quote-unquote heavy metal album. And John Sykes just goes off on guitar on that record. Co-wrote a couple of the songs. He played on the live album called Life that also came out in 1983, a double LP. And then Thin Lizzy was no more, unfortunately. Sykes wanted to continue playing with Phil Lynott, or Lynott, depending how you say it. And they were going to form a band, and that really never came to fruition. Next, David Coverdale came calling, and all of a sudden, John Sykes is the new guitar player in Whitesnake. Now, the first time I ever personally heard John Sykes was on the American version of Slide It In. When I heard the song Slow and Easy, I said, wow, that's a little reminiscent of Led Zeppelin, but that is a kick-butt song. And besides Slow and Easy, Love Ain't No Stranger was a really good ballad, and there's a lot of heavy guitars. And I said, oh, I like this stuff. Few years later, John Sykes had written a whole album, basically, with David Coverdale, and in 1987, the self-titled Whitesnake album came out. John Sykes is on the record, but before the record was even completed, Coverdale, who changed band members a lot over the 10-year history by that point of Whitesnake, had changed the whole band around, fired the band, so he fired John Sykes, who had co-written the whole album with him. And when you hear this album, the standout tracks on this record to me, I wrote them down so I don't forget any. Still of the Night, definitely. Crying in the Rain, of course, it's the 1987 version. It's the metallic version. Don't Turn Away, to me, was a deep track that I love from the record. And a little while after that, I heard the song that was on the European pressing, but not on the American pressing, a 6.5-minute song called Looking for Love. Now, this record went 8 times platinum in America, but a lot of people who bought the record, who heard Here I Go Again and loved that song, that's why one of the reasons the record sold so well is this love, the really, soft ballad on the record, softy, as the great George LeMay would say. Those were the songs that really sold the record to non-metal fans, non-hard rock fans. And the record is 8 times platinum in the States, the biggest selling Whitesnake album. Nothing in their catalog before sold as well, and of course nothing after sold as well. But Sykes is out of the band. So he formed a new band in 88 or so. Actually 87, he started getting together with Tony Franklin, the fretless monster they call him, because the guy plays a nasty fretless bass. And you could tell that sound. And if you've heard the 2 records, or at least the song Radioactive by The Firm, that bass that you hear during Radioactive, that is Tony Franklin. And he's a journeyman bass player. He's played on zillions of albums over the past 40 years. Great bass player. And then from Vanilla Fudge, Cactus, Beck Bogart, and Appice, you got Carmine Appice on the drums. So they're a power trio. They put out a record in 1989 called Blue Murder, just a self-titled debut album. And to me, it's the successor of Whitesnake, the self-titled album, 1987. It's a great hard rock / metal album. And besides playing all the guitars on the record, Sykes wrote every song, or co-wrote every song, and he sings on the whole record. So besides doing background vocals on the last Whitesnake record that he was on, the self-titled record, 87, whatever you want to call it, pardon me, he sings on this record. He's got a really good voice. So the guy's a triple threat: singer, songwriter, guitar player. And he had a tone and a great sound. He used pinch harmonics, and he had this type of thing that he used on so many songs where you hear it and you go, oh, that zooming guitar sound going up and down the fretboard, that is John Sykes. Guy was an amazing player, and it's very sad that he passed so young. Now, on the Blue Murder record, I wrote down my favorite songs on there. Riot, the opening track, is great. Valley of the Kings, a 7+ minute epic, mini epic. Jelly Roll is a melodic mini masterpiece. Blue Murder, that drum groove by Carmine, and that's co-written by the 3 members of the band. That is a heavy song, and that is a great song, the title track from the record. And towards the end of the album, I mean, there are 9 songs, there are no bad tracks, but I would say Ptolemy is the other outstanding song. So those are my 5 favorites from the Blue Murder record in 1989. I remember working at Titus Oaks at the time, and my coworkers and I, the few of us who liked hard rock and heavy metal, Joe, Leah, and I, we played Blue Murder a lot, and we also played the self-titled debut from Badlands, Jake E. Lee's band with the late Ray Gillen. So those were 2 records, 2 CDs we spun a lot in 1989, 1990. And I always went back to the Blue Murder record because I loved it so much. And it should have done better. But I think the reason it didn't is because it just didn't have that killer song that the Whitesnake 87 record had with Here I Go Again. That was the song that made that album a juggernaut. And you could say Out of Love is sort of in that vein, or maybe Jelly Roll, but they just didn't have the panache of Here I Go Again, which was an old Whitesnake song that Coverdale had done and dusted off, and it became a huge hit for him. What was it, 5 years? I think it was on Saints and Sinners, originally from 1982, if memory serves. But that Blue Murder album is great, and if you don't know it, you should check it out. For Sykes singing, guitar playing, and songwriting. The second track on the record, it's called Sex Child. The lyrics haven't aged too well, but musically it's dynamite. And Tony Franklin is aces on that song too. For the whole record, I mean, all 3 guys smoke on that record. Now, 4 years later in 1993, because Sykes was then becoming the real perfectionist, took him a long time to put out a follow-up album, and by that time, both Carmine and Tony Franklin were out of the band. So he got new guys in the band, and it's a decent record. It just doesn't touch the first album. So that's in 93. He released the follow-up, and the name of it, did I write it down? Because it just flew right out of my head. I didn't write it down. But the old band dissolved. They had the follow-up. I think it's not Here Comes Trouble. Nothing But Trouble, that's it. Nothing But Trouble. A year later, in 1984, there was a live album that I think first came out as a Japanese import. And it was hard to get, and it has some Blue Murder stuff, some Whitesnake stuff on it, Thin Lizzy stuff, and it's called Screaming Blue Murder in 1994. So they have a very short discography, 2 studio records, 1 live record for Blue Murder. Now, over the next 3 decades, John Sykes put out 5 solo records only. So for the last 30 years, only 5 solo records. The names of them are, and they might be a little hard to find some of them, Out of My Tree, Loveland, 20th Century, Nuclear Cowboy, and another live album, Bad Boy Live. He was working on a new album, for a very long time. In 2021, he released 2 new songs from the long-delayed album, and then he either passed from cancer in late 2024 or early 2025. They really haven't officially said when he passed away, unfortunately. Should also add that in the late 2000s, early 2010s, he almost formed a band with Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater, who was then out of Dream Theater, now he's back in Dream Theater, and Billy Sheehan on bass. But because Sykes was such a perfectionist, it took so long to get something going that the band dissolved. Portnoy and Sheehan got Richie Kotzen in the band, and that's the band that became the Winery Dogs. But Portnoy said they worked on about 10 or so Sykes songs. Now, are those the songs that are on the forthcoming album, if it ever sees the light of day, or not? Nobody knows. But, I mean, in the 80s, he was very prolific, and then I guess he just wanted things his way. He wanted to run whatever project he was in, and it worked out to his detriment. It didn't work out. It was detrimental to his career because his output just faded away, unfortunately, and the guy was such a monster talent. And to pass away at the age of 65, which is not much older than I am, it was a shock when it just came out a few days ago that he had passed away. So I just want to say rest in peace, John Sykes, and thank you for the music. We'll always have the music. I'm Davey Cretin for Cretin Classics. Like, subscribe, comment on your thoughts on John Sykes. What are your favorite records by him? Maybe it's the Tiger stuff. Maybe it's the solo stuff, Blue Murder, Whitesnake. Let me know what you think about John Sykes. What are your favorite songs and albums? Say it in the comments below. You could check out my other videos. And also, I have over 60 appearances on other channels. So check out my appearances on other channels because I've done almost 100 videos on YouTube. I really hate to promote myself on a video like this, but it's the way things go. So rest in peace, John Sykes. Thank you for the music. I'm Davey Cretin for Cretin Classics. Rock out, prog on, pogo. Take care, everyone. Listen to John Sykes' music because the guy was an amazing guitar player. Thanks. Bye-bye.